welcome to Maximal Fire. I'm Alex, and I thought today we would do something a little bit different. We're going to do a very, very short, hopefully short, we'll see. I say short, normally short for us is less than 2 hours, but hopefully short, hot take on some of the new stuff that's come out this weekend by Games Workshop, in particular the matched play guide for Adeptus Titanicus, which I am very excited about, being a tournament organizer myself. And we're also going to have a look through some of the new Graviton guns that have come out for the Warlord, the Warhound, and the Reaver. And I'm going to, I guess, talk through some of my thoughts, my first feelings, and yeah, hopefully this will give you an idea as well what to expect, certainly from our opinion on the new book. But also where we think the weapons might see play. So it was certainly a surprise when the book was announced. It was a welcome surprise. We haven't had much in the way of content for Titanicus since the Direwolf, which was June, I think, around that sort of time. It was before Beachhead, certainly. So first half of the year. So it was quite refreshing to see something. It wasn't what anybody really thought it was going to be. But at the same time, I think it was quite welcome. The match play book, or the match play guide, I should say, in particular, has kind of summed up a lot of loose ends which were kind of created by the main rule book. In particular, the biggest problem with Adeptus Titanicus up to this point, as much as I love it, was the fact that the missions within the rulebook were pretty terrible, and you really needed the open engine war cards to really get like the full experience, in my opinion anyway, of the game. You know, like some proper objectives, some decent secondaries, a kind of more balanced game. And the open engine war cards in particular were perfect for running tournaments in. Every tournament we ran it around the open engine war cards, because there was just so much imbalance in the original missions, the primary objectives in particular, in the main rulebook. So we're obviously 5 years into the game now, 4 years into the game now, and there's been a lot that's happened. So it's nice that they finally decided to put this into a book form, which hopefully will be around forever, let's hope, because the biggest part of the problem with the open engine war cards was if you didn't get them when they were released, you're now paying 50 quid plus for a pack of them on eBay, because they're rarer than rocking horse shit that you can get at a normal kind of price, which is a real shame, because of how good they made the game. And they really were, in our opinion, integral to, you know, the best possible kind of introduction to the game. So anyway, rambling started already, but the match play guide, let's talk about this first. So this is softback. It's the first softback book that they have released for Titanicus. Everything else has been hardback. It's 54 pages. It's quite thin. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see just how thin it actually is. It is full colour, which is great. Like all of their publications, it is really nice, really pretty book. And the first, I mean, obviously you could say, well, you could obviously fit way more into this if you wanted to, but it is a good size for just chucking into like an army book, an army case or something like that. I use KR multi-cases to transport my Titans around occasionally. I certainly did when I took them on a plane for the first time. And the size of this book would mean that in a pinch, you could probably rest this in a KR multi-case above, or in a Games Workshop Citadel case, in that kind of foam layer above your Titans, and it wouldn't press too much down or add too much weight to it. So that's good. Having flicked through it, I feel like this is going to be a book which is going to get thumbed through quite a bit. If you're planning on using match play every time you play, which to be honest is generally how my group play, we've never played pick up the Titans and put them on the board and play a game and hope for the best. We've always played pretty much match play. So it's going to get a lot of use, and with it being softback. My only criticism is, and I've kind of noticed this already, that the spine isn't great. So I'm worried that it might, with a bit of overuse, wear out a little bit. But saying that, the book is only £16 in the UK, which is really cheap for Games Workshop books. It's, like 10 or so quids cheaper than one of the hardback books. So I guess if it does get a lot of love, it's not the end of the world if you need to buy a new one. But even so, just that's the only bit that kind of immediately sort of jumped out at me when I was looking through it. But other than that, what I will start with is by giving you kind of my initial pros and cons to this book. The things which I've liked, the things which I didn't like so much, but also then afterwards I'll kind of probably go in a little bit more to like how this book will impact your gameplay and the key changes that it will bring to the game from what I have seen already from having read it. So what is probably the main reason to buy this is it gives a nice level playing field for all players. It's something that we tried to kind of do a little bit with our tournament guides that we've provided before, and also our unofficial FAQ. Although it doesn't go to the same level of detail of answering many of the FAQ questions, it certainly does kind of explain a bit more like how you run a game. There was questions like, what do you roll off on when you start a game? Some missions in the rulebook said one thing, another said another thing. So what is the kind of general consensus? It's also got a good set of new missions, which are a nice change from the open engine war cards, but also it kind of does feel like they've refined what they tried to do in the original rulebook. There is, right at the end of the book, there's some really nice summary pages. So you've got, things in there like site item powers, reactor tables. If any of you are familiar with the Lazy Princeps guide, it's very similar kind of idea to that, all compressed down into a few pages. So that's really, really nice. They've also introduced some new narrative elements in the form of conquest benefits, which seems like they're going to be a really good idea and really used quite widely in the narrative events field. I look forward to trying a few of those out. But on the flip side, the things that I've noticed as possibly like the downside of the book is some things seem to have been omitted which probably should have been included. For one, having a flick through the back into the summary pages, as an example, there's the Awakened Machine Spirit table. You've got the Catastrophic Damage table, the Reactor Overload table, and the site item manifestation table, but there's no Awakened Entity table. I thought, maybe that's because they want you to buy the Traitor book, but then, I had to question why would they include the Sinister tables in there, which is in the Loyalist book, and you'd say, well, go buy the Loyalist book for that, but not include the Corruptions table, Machine Spirit equivalent, which I thought was a bit of an odd miss. I mean, sometimes there's obviously a lead time with getting these things to print, but I would have expected the Awakened Entity table in here. I would have hoped as well that there would have been maybe a summary of some of the corruptions, just to make it a little bit more to hand. I can understand if that was a creative choice why they wouldn't include that. But obviously everything else is in here. So yeah, shame that it's not got the Awakened Entity in here. And the other thing which I noticed as well is, apart from the obvious omission which other people have picked up on, there's no Graviton weapons in the weapon tables. This isn't surprising because of the lead time it takes from releasing a new product and getting it printed. I imagine that the book was already in print by the time that they were releasing the Graviton rules, which is why it's not in there. It does finally have, which was missing from other previous books, the Volkite weapons for the Reaver and the Warhound, but it is missing, from what I can see anyway, unless I'm completely blind, it is missing the Warlord Volkite Destructor from the tables, which seems strange. It's there for the Reaver and it's there for the Warhound, but it's not there for the Warlord. So a little bit strange. So that is kind of like my first impressions, I guess. So overall, some really good stuff, but there is just a couple of niggling things, which it kind of hasn't quite removed the need for taking a bunch of other books with you as well. But let's go on more to talking about some of the key changes that I've picked up on, at least going through this. I'm sure there's a load of others, and I'm not going to go through everything. I'll let you read through the book in your own at your own pace. But there's a couple of nice little changes, and for the most part, when it comes to running an event as a tournament organizer, there's not a lot in here that I've seen that I haven't thought that I wanted to include in our next event. So our next event is the Beachhead Team Tournament, which is going to be in February 2023. I've said that since this was announced, I'd probably tweak some of the rules pack. And reading through this, I am going to tweak the rules pack. And there's a lot in here that I like, and there's a lot in here that I'm definitely going to include, or at least to try out, because I'm keen to sort of see how this actually works in a tournament setting. So the first thing I noticed is, and this to me I think is a good change. There are people who are going to say that it isn't, but for match play now, you cannot take a Legio with no Legio rules. So it was quite common in tournaments that we've run before that it was a tactical choice that you would take no Legio rules, and that would deny your opponent 2 stratagem points. And it was basically then you would end up with 5 because they'd probably taken a Legio like Graviton or Furians or something, but you would only have 3 stratagem points to play against them at a 1750 because they took no Legio rules. So similar to Night Houses, they're not a Legio, so you don't get the 2 strategy points for it. Now, Knights obviously still don't count as Legio, so they're still the same. You'd only take 3 against a Knight household. But you can no longer go and say, right, well, this maniple has no Legio traits at all. You have to take 1. So you have to take a maniple as part of your battle group, and that battle group has to have an allegiance, either Loyalist, Traitor, or Black Shield, and it has to have a set of Legio rules, be that the pre-printed ones or from the Defensive Riser Crusade Legios list. But you have to take something. The only exception which allows you to take no Legio rules is if you have a support Titan. So if you brought in an Iconoclast or something like that, you could say, well, that guy doesn't have any Legio rules attached to him. Why you would do that, I'm not really sure, but that is an option if you want to do that now. But other than that, it remains the same. You take more than 1 type of Legio rule, then you're going to give 2 strategy points to your opponent, but I quite like the no Legio rules clarification, let's call it. This is something which, again, we've always said it's a narrative game. It just always felt a bit weird and a bit gamey, to me at least, to play the game whereby you're just doing it just purely to deny your opponent strategy points, but stratagem points. But I can see why in a tournament setting that would have use. So that's the first one. The other main change, or rather, I don't know if this is a change or a clarification, but game length was always kind of a bit questionable, because that varied again on the original missions. It used to be might be 4, and then you roll the dice to see if it went to turn 5 or turn 6. Games are in match play 5 turns. So that I think is good as well, because the amount of times I've played games against other people, and I've seen it happen at tournaments as an organizer where somebody has lost a game because that final dice roll didn't roll over from turn 4. He didn't get a 5th turn essentially, or he didn't get a 6th turn, or it did go for another longer turn, went on to the turn 6. So now they last 5 turns, but it does state that there are things. I haven't been able to find a situation yet, but I haven't really trawled through every single one of the primary objectives yet. But there are certain things which might change that game length. But generally, 5 turns. You know what you got to play with. Really like that. That's good. They've also officialized the dice rolling for rolling off at the start of the game. So again, another thing which varied from mission to mission. We've always played it this way, and this is the way I believe, which is in our FAQ pack. But now what happens if you are the player who finishes your deployment first, when you come to roll off to see who's the first player, the person who finished deployment first rolls a d10, and the person who deployed second rolls a d6. And that just adds a little bit of an advantage to having less Titans or less activations, because you're more likely to get that first turn. So I like that they've included that, or rather they've made that the way that you start the game now. Something else which often came up, and I see this on Discord quite often, and what was the size of objectives? This was only ever clarified on the open engine war cards. And if you didn't have the open engine war cards, it wasn't in the rule book, but it was kind of implied by the objective counter that you get in the starter set. Objectives are confirmed, reconfirmed, whatever you want to say, 32 millimeters. So your standard 32 millimeter base is the size of your objectives. Next up was quite a big change to how tertiaries work. Now, I've played quite a lot of 1850 games, and also our last event ran an 1850, and at that kind of size, we noticed that tertiaries, especially amongst the competitive players, the experienced players, that extra stratagem point that you got between 1750 and 1850 just equated to somebody taking a score to settle, which is an extra VP. For every Titan you kill. I mean, I certainly took it myself when I went up to Newcastle, South Shields. I'm sure they'll correct me, because I was racking up between 5 and 7 extra victory points in a game, which often means the difference between winning, losing, and drawing. And at that sort of sized game, they became an auto take because you've got your 5 stratagem points that you can comfortably know how to use, and you know how to deal with that 1750. So all you're doing is adding that extra one on there to kind of give you the advantage to getting the win in a tournament setting. What they've done now is that they've said that you can only score primary and secondary objectives, and I believe it's 25 points for a primary, and in the open engine war cards it was a maximum of 10 victory points for a secondary, but in the new ruling it's up to 15, so you can score up to 15 with your secondary objectives. Now what the tertiaries do is they make topping out at 15 a little bit easier. They don't give you points beyond the 15 secondaries, but they can help you. So if you were only scoring 10 on the secondary objective, and at the end of the game you had a score to settle that you could play and you kill 5 Titans, you would get 15. But if you got the full 15 for your secondary and also killed 5 Titans, then you wouldn't get 5 extra points. It just helps you reach that 15 cap a little bit easier, which I think is quite a nice way to do tertiaries, because it means you don't get locked into the secondary, but it also means if your secondary is completely kaput, then there is potentially other things up your sleeve that you can do to claw back a few extra points. So that was nice. I quite like that. I'm really interested to see how that changes the game, because tertiaries really were king in both the previous 2 tournaments that we've run, and in some cases people took 2, and then the points just start really running away with themselves. They've also said that you maximum can only take 1, whether that's one given to you by your Princeps ability or by your Legion ability or whatever, or a stratagem card. You can only have 1. So there is that. They've also clarified you cannot take the same Princeps trait more than once, which means no more double... I've got the name of it now. Dominant strategist, or no more double and in my case, because I've run this before and it was disgusting. No more Gravonicus double reckless maverick. You can only take each senioris trait once, and that is across maniples, or it is also there's certain legios which also allow you to have 2 Princeps within the same maniple. It's the same regardless. You can only have the same one once. So that's good. Also, they have stated that in a tournament environment, you have to choose your Princeps traits at battle group creation and not before the game. So quite often I, would change what I was taking and who I was taking it on depending on my opponent, because that was the wording in the previous one. Now you have to pre-declare, this is my battle force, these are my Princeps seniorities, and these are the traits that they have, and that is it for the whole event. So again, I quite like that. It allows you to build more around those, but it does pull you back, restrict you, and also you obviously have to think about whether you'll get that use all the time, or how that might come across another against a different opponent to what you're used to playing. Breath and a drink of cider very quickly. Not used to doing these things solo. They're I may now do a lot of talking on the podcast anyway, but very strange doing it for the first time on my own. Stratagems is the next big change that they've put in. Again, a welcome change, I think, here. I quite like this idea. You have a hand of cards, again, which you create at battle group creation. So at 1250, you have 4 cards you can choose from. At 1750, it's 6. And at beyond 1750, you have 8. So you choose 8 cards, and that is your hand. It can be of any points, but you choose 8. And what that allows you to do is you can choose from that 8 any of them throughout the game that you are playing, but you cannot exceed the number that you are allowed to play. So in a 1750, for example, you have 6 cards in your hand. They could be 6 that are worth 3 points, or they could be 6 which are worth 1 point, whatever. But throughout the game, you choose which of those 6 cards you are going to play. And you have to keep track of how much each of them is worth. And you obviously cannot go beyond your 5. But it means you can be a little bit adaptive, but also you can't completely build your stratagem hand and your stratagem list around hard countering your opponent. So I quite like that as well. You have to kind of think a little bit more, or maybe I'll keep this one up my sleeve if I come across Combat Legio, this one if I come across Knights, but the rest of them in the middle are going to be a kind of sort of generic assistance package that'll be useful, whatever. So I do quite like that. It also means that you might not necessarily have the option of playing all of your 5, because if you have taken a handful of 6 and all of them are 2 points, then you cannot spend 5 points. You can only spend 4 or 6, and because the limit is 5, you can only spend 2 and play 2 of them and spend the 4 points. And likewise with the tertiary objectives, they would still form part of your hand if you wanted to still take the tertiary objectives, and you need that amount of points up your sleeve at the end of the game, still there, ready to use for you to actually play it and score those points at the end. So that's nice. I quite like that. Really interested to see how that runs on the table. I'm hopefully going to be getting a game in the next couple of days, and that will be how we play it. With regards to the deployment zones and the maps, all of them are very familiar. There's not anything massively new. I don't recall seeing anything which was like completely new. There's no equivalent of Spearhead in this, which was often either reviled or celebrated, depending on if you're a Combat Legion or not. But generally what they've done is they've taken deployments from Open Engine War for the most part, and quite a few of them seem to have been increased in range or deployment size, which is quite good, because some of them were very limiting on what you could actually fit in, especially some of the triangular deployments, especially the edge, you couldn't really fit that much in. But what that has done is it's created a smaller no man's land in the middle. There's some where the deployments are only about 16 inches apart or thereabouts. So it makes me think that maybe the game is kind of favouring that mid-range kind of combat, or the close combat, it's certainly going to be a lot easier to, or a lot quicker to get within, your standard 24 inches, 20 inches for your VMBs, that kind of stuff. So that's interesting. And again, something that I'm looking forward to testing out. And I'm not going to go into the detail of the primaries and secondaries because I'd be here all night. But generally speaking, I would say that they look pretty good. They seem much better than the original rulebook version. I do need to really test them to see how they work. The way that they work essentially is you will dice off, and you roll 2 dice. You'll pick the two from one of the. You'll pick one of the 2 that you roll, which equates to the primary or secondary that you've picked. So that's good. Adds a bit of variation as well. It does suggest you rolling for the deployment zones as well, but certainly in a tournament setting, I think I'd probably be setting the deployment zones, and then I'd be making a decision on whether or not I just let people roll for primaries, or if maybe it does suggest another way of doing it is you give people like a hand of primaries that you can choose from as well, and they can choose to use one, which seems like an interesting idea. I'll probably do some variation of one of those in the next event that we run. But yeah, much better. Quite interesting. They've taken some familiar ones and they've revamped them. Things like the kill missions from Open Engine War, that's now effectively a secondary, which I think is quite nice. Kill was almost like the go-to primary objective in the rule book. So to have that as a secondary objective rewards killing your opponent and mauling them, but it means that it is still more objective based, and I like that because I've always liked the objective play of the Open Engine War cards. So those are my kind of like initial thoughts. Some really nice changes. A few things, like I said, which it would have been nice to see in the book, which isn't. But overall, I think this is going to be useful to anybody who's planning on going to an event. And even if one of you amongst your group of players that you play with locally has a copy of this, just for your local games night, I think it's going to throw open a load of new content, which is going to allow people to refresh their time at the table. Which is always welcome. Everyone kind of gets stuck into the same kind of like, well, we're doing Spearhead again, and it's going to be Wrath and Ruin again, so it's nice to freshen it up. And the thing which I think has made me most encouraged about this is obviously a guide that Games Workshop want to encourage, and to kind of bring everybody together under the same kind of rules, which makes me hope we might be seeing some official events coming next year, which would be incredible. We obviously haven't seen anything since before lockdown. There's been a lot that's happened since then. The community has kept this game running in the meantime really well. 80 events I'm seeing on our Discord are still selling out all over the place, which is incredible. Still a lot of people wanting it. We've obviously sold out at Beachhead as well, already, like 5 months in advance, 4 months in advance. We've added a few more tickets because we think that there's the demand for it. So hopefully Warhammer World events maybe, or kind of like officially sponsored GT events or something, would be great to see. There's rules for doubles in this, which makes me wonder, are they thinking about doing a doubles event? And the doubles ruling that they've done is quite interesting as well, because you basically, as long as your side between the two of you adheres to the mandatory requirements of a battle group, so one maniple, then who you're with can take whatever they want. So if you wanted to take, and you fielded like a maniple of Reavers, and then your buddy could take a War Master and or a couple of Direwolves or something like that, and he's not locked in to that, both providing a maniple. So that's really interesting. I'm really keen to sort of see if they plan on doing a doubles event, and I look forward to the opportunity to playing at my first doubles event. So if anybody is thinking about it, let me know, and we'll get it on the channel, and we'll get it on the Discord, and we'll get it promoted. So, anyway, that's the book. Let's talk about the new guns. So the new guns, you've got the Graviton Destructor and the Graviton Ruinator. So the Destructor is the Reaver and the Warhound weapon, and the Ruinator is the Warlord weapon. The biggest surprise for me this time is that when I saw the weapon cards for the first time, they were well pointed. Normally with Forge World weapons, since things like the Gatling, which is a great weapon, they've always been a little bit overcosted. Like the Volkite, I thought was a bit expensive for what it did. Same with things like the Ursus claws, considering the fragility of them. I think they could have been done with doing just a tad, little bit cheaper. But these are really nicely pointed. They come in at so the Carapace Destructor for the Reaver and the Warlord Graviton Destructor are the same price as a Turbo Laser Destructor, and this to me makes the Destructor start to kind of look a little bit obsolete. Maybe not obsolete, but it certainly gives it a run for its money. Now, these things have got a 38-inch range. 38 inches is an interesting, seems just strange length to go to. It doesn't kind of conform to the normal increments that they had. But anyway, 18 to 38, no accuracy penalties or bonuses, but long range weapon. It's only got the 1 dice, and the Warhound and the Reaver version are strength 9. So that's the same strength as a Quake Cannon. And these things have got concussive, and they have got rending. Now, it's the rending there which makes it really quite spicy, because at strength 9, that means that you can crit anything in the game with this weapon. I mean, you're only getting the 1 dice, so you're only going to be doing 1 crit. But I think against things like Acastus Knights, for instance, you've got the potential of taking it out, because you're getting that. If you roll a 6, your strength is then 15, and you're rolling an additional D3 on top of that for the rending. So, if you're rolling a 6, the minimum you're getting is a 16, and you only need to roll a 2 or a 3 to hit 17, and the 17 will auto kill an Acastus. So that's quite nice. But the concussive element of it is, for me, what is the most tasty thing about this, because concussive against knights will auto shake a knight banner, and that means order's gone. So knight defense on those Reavers and Warhounds, which they haven't really had up until now, other than straight up killing stuff, a couple of plasma blast guns and melter cannons into things and just kill things and hope that they fail at their leadership tests. But the concussive will take that away straight away. So that's good. I like that. I don't think that these are going to be weapons which are going to be OP. I don't think that they're auto takes, but I think that there is room for one of these in most lists, in most mana pools at least, to give you a bit of option. But the really tasty thing about this is not only is it 20 points, but there is no push. So we have a Warhound weapon, which is pumping out some high strength with some nice anti-knight, not to mention you moving people around. If you hit a charging a Reaver that's going to charge you, knock it and turn it around 45 degrees, it might not stop the charge, but if there's a guy behind it, you might cause a collision or something like that, which would be quite interesting and quite nice. But no push means it's viable on a Warhound. Like the amount of weapons which have come out recently for the Warhound, it's push, and it's like, well, I could take that and potentially blow myself up, or I could take a weapon which is safe. And yeah, the lack of having to push that on a Warhound is pretty huge. So long range, which synergizes nice with a lot of different weapons. I can see the Graviton Destructor on the Reaver coupling up with like a rifleman double volcano cannon Reaver, for instance. It also allows you, because it's not blast, it allows you you can target with it. It's only 1 dice, obviously, but you've got the option of targeting. And it's, it is it's a good range. You coupled up the Warhound with a turbo laser destructor on the other arm, for instance. You've got a backline Warhound at that point, and it can push if it really wants to for the shield bane on the lasers. But you've then definitely got that 1 strength 9, which good against knights, and can potentially push a few titans around, which is going to be good. But the Gravinator Ruinator, the Warlord weapon, is really quite tasty. So its short range is 22 inches and it goes up to 45 inches. It has 2 dice, and it's strength 10. Strength 10 to strength 9 for me has always been quite a big difference. Like I say, at strength 9 you can't really, generally speaking, there's a lot of things you can't crit at strength 9. Strength 10 you can. But again, with rending, that means a 6 is an auto 17. Which means it's an auto dead Acastus, or it's a crit on an Iconoclast. And having 2 of those, it means that this is quite a good. I wouldn't call it a finisher, but like it'll punch a hole on something. I can see this being coupled up well with a volcano cannon and maybe something like Apocalypse missile launchers on the top, because you would have your Bellicosa. Which could punch a hole in a location. The Graviton Ruinator that could then try for a targeted shot against that location, just drill it in a little bit further, and then you've got the Apocalypse missile launchers when you're getting towards the end of the track to try and finish it off. And it makes for a nice alternative to a Quake Cannon. The biggest thing that I have for this Ruinator over the Quake Cannon is not only is it's an extra point of strength higher, it obviously loses the blast of the Quake, which some people like because you can get more than 2 hits. But over the whole, you're getting 2 hits on the Titan. You're getting potentially 2 hits with the dice 2 here. It doesn't have the Quake, so you're not slowing anything down. But again, you're still getting that concussive. So again, Knights, good against Knights, and pushing other Titans around, basically. But the biggest thing it has for me over the Quake Cannon is there's no -1 under 24 inches. As we saw, and as I alluded to earlier on, the deployment zones seem to be getting closer, and most of the game, in my experience, ends up being played under 20 inches. And that -1 for Quake has always been pretty. I've struggled with that. I mean, you can put it on a backline Warlord with a Volcano Cannon. But even then, very quickly, you're going to end up under 24 inches, going to be taking those minuses to hit. Yes, you might still hit it because it's blast, so it scatters. That's the advantage. You might just prefer blast over, hedging your bets and hoping that you'll hit something else. But it's, to me, not having that -1 means you can fit a Ruinator with a Bellicosa. It can sit on the back line. It's got 45 inches of range, so it's going to hit everything across a normal 4x4 table. And yeah, it's a solid option. And we've not even started talking about if this was in an Extergamus Maniple. So you can make that strength 12 in the Extergamus Maniple for just 1 point of heat, which is then really tasty. And yeah, and if you I'm looking at Gryphonicus, I'm looking at Venator here, but Reaver Extergamus Maniples that you can get with those guys, the Graviton Destructor, strength 11 for 1 point of heat, with concussive and rending, and because that's got the 360 carapace on those loadouts, to me it's screaming for a split fire. You have the rest of your weapons which could be targeted on something else, but you then have the option with the split fire that you might be able to use that 360 to go, I'm going to unload my Melter Cannon and my Gatling into that Reaver over there, but those Knights are coming up on the left hand flank. I'm going to fire my concussive destructor at them. It's strength 11, so they're not getting any shields for anything. And then they're not going to charge next turn. So yeah, it's really tasty. All of these, I think, have got room in Maniples. I think that there is room for one of these in most Maniples. Now, I wouldn't take the Ruinator on your only Warlord personally. I would probably still favour the Gatling and Plasma option, or the double Plasma option if it was your only Warlord. But you take more than one Warlord, I think there's a conversation to be had as to what you want to do with it, whether you want to take a Volkite, for instance, or you want to take a Ruinator. And the Ruinator is cheaper. So, yeah, but certainly an Audax or Solaria or any Warhound heavy list often struggles against Knights, just because they can die so easily from them. The Destructor having an anti-Knight defense, great in that. And the same with any Reaver heavy list. I think that there is room in most forces. I would be really surprised if Corsairs don't have at least one of these in a Corsair. Your Lupercal doesn't have one of these in a Lupercal. I don't think they'll be all over the place, but I can see them getting a lot of use because they've been priced so well. So that is basically it. I don't really have anything else to say at this point. I'm sure as I read through this book a second and third time, I'm going to pick up on more things and get excited or kind of confused. I always try and look through these things to try and point out, try and find kind of where there's more ambiguity from new rules which get added in, because more often than not I end up getting asked on the Discord channel, like, well, what does this mean? And I've only found one so far in the new book, and that is related to the primary mission retrieval, and they talk about central horizontal lines on the deployment map, and there are some deployments where you can be deployed in the central horizontal line of the deployment map, which means that potentially you could score and get maximum points for your objective on turn 1. So I would assume that is not the idea with that. I think we need some clarification on what they mean by a central horizontal line. There is a physical central horizontal line on the maps that they've used, but then there are, like I say, deployment zones which overlap that. So you would just put it in your own objective, in your own deployment zone, pick it up turn 1 and score it turn 1. It can't be the intention there. So I'm wondering if they actually mean like the central line drawn across the deployment maps. But GW, if you're listening, that'd be an interesting one to kind of get a little bit of clarity on. It's obviously not going to come up all the time, and I think we certainly will be house ruling that it's the central point rather than potentially in your own deployment zone. But it would be good to get an FAQ on that at some point if you are listening. So do let us know your thoughts if you have read, I should say, the match play guides. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you liked. There's already really loads of active discussion on our Discord at the moment. So if you're not part of our Discord community, we've got like one of the biggest AT focused Discord communities out there. Adeptus Titanicus is the focus of what we talk about. We also talk about other stuff. We've got other rooms as well for all the other channels, so a lot of people will post up what they're painting, even if they're painting other games. But great community. We have hobby hangouts like pretty much, well, certainly twice a month. We aim for every week, where guys will get down and they'll be painting together, chatting hobby together, talking AT together. It's really great. And you can also obviously get a little bit more out of that, a bit more, you can get closer to the channel and to me and Johnny and the other guys by joining our Patreon, which unlocks the patron room on the Discord, and also gets 10% off at Battle Bling. So do that. If you're watching on YouTube, do give us a like and a subscribe, and let me know what you think. And until next time, guys, we'll hopefully be back soon with a proper podcast, where I'm sure we'll digest and talk about this a little bit more with the benefits of hindsight. But in the interests of getting you the hot gossip here it is. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you again next time. So until next time, guys, always remember to go big, go loud, and go maximal.